you are very capable of solving this problem on your own. And
Love it.
sometimes the solution is literally just asking for help. A lot of times they'll just be like, I can't find it. I'll be like, can't help you unless you ask. You got to ask for something. I'm totally willing to help you. And so sometimes even just taking ownership is acknowledging the fact that you don't know something and just asking specifically for it instead of just complaining. And that's one thing I find myself in conversation with my kids a lot, trying to train them out of helplessness and into agency. Like I've taken ownership over the solution to this.
Hey, today's episode is with Josh Cantrell. I think you're going to find a tremendous amount of value with it. In the first part of the conversation, we're talking about how we interact with our kids, different kinds of values we have, and what is important to Josh and his family that you can take away. After that, we talk a lot about something that I think that fathers and we as men don't talk about as much as we need to, maybe as society as much. And that is simply your commitment to your wife and your spouse. And what are the different questions you're asking? And what are the different ways that you're controlling um, those aspects of your life that either reinforce or take away from your commitment? Really important discussion for fathers. And then finally, we're talking about what to do and what is it like to be in a house that has a really huge event that happens that can change the very fabric of how you interact with one another and how you interact as a family. Really great conversation. I really hope that you stick to the end. This with Josh Cantrell. Welcome to the show. I had the pleasure of meeting you at one of our brand builders events, a Revenue Engine. And before I get into a little bit, I was super impressed not only with the way that you articulated yourself, we had a little bit of a roundtable and you were in front of us in our group and really providing a lot of value. So if you could just give us an elevator pitch or a brief intro to you and we'll jump right in.
Yeah, sure. From what I do perspective, like that's a big question a lot of people have when they first meet someone is, what do you do? So what I do for money is I have a copywriting agency. So I help folks, business owners, typically like in the $500,000 to $5 million range, figure out how they talk about what they do in a way that makes people pay attention and listen and hopefully buy stuff. And we'll, in the marketing world, what we call that is like messaging, right? So we help you figure out your messaging, and then we help you create the marketing resources that you need to make your business seen and heard and understood and hopefully grow your sales. So like websites and emails and blogs and sales collateral and ads and all that kind of stuff. And then there's like a strategy element that comes in to all of it too, towards what should we be doing? We can help you figure that stuff out too. Right now, my business is me and some contractors all around the world. And I kind of like it that way. I don't have any W-2 employees. It's just me and a lot of flexibility and a lot of great people around me support my clients. So that's what I do, quote unquote.
Sure. Let's jump into, because I think the other answer, I think the one that you wanted to answer was like, who are you? Who am I? So tell us a little bit about that. It's super clear that freedom is something that's really important to you. And generally, definitely for fathers, that there's a time element there. So I know I'm leading a little bit, but go ahead and let us know.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. So who am I? I would say I am a kind of a reforming lazy man. I like in my heart, like I just don't want to do anything. You know what I mean? That's not totally true. But it's go ahead.
I was gonna say one of my favorite quotes is Anthony Bourdain, and I remember him saying this. He said, "There's this dude inside of me that he just wants to sit around and smoke weed all day and play video games, and my life's work is not doing that. Is not listening to that guy on the inside, that lazy guy." I know that fathers out there, I know that we're all struggling with that a little bit.
Totally, man. Yeah. So I would say like over the past 5 to 8 years or so, I've been changing from the perspective of the life throws things at me and I just react to them versus, oh, I want to create a certain kind of life for myself and my family. And like
Mm,
changing from the like reactive, just handling what life throws at you. And I guess this is my life, just responding to these things versus, oh, I want to create this life or this legacy or this financial situation, this time freedom for me and my family. And over the past 5 years, 10 years, I've been going through a big mindset transformation from they talk about growth mindset versus kind of stagnant mindset, or
mhm.
I actually can't remember the other term, but
Fixed.
basically, yeah, just fixed mindset. Yes, thank you. Carol Dweck
Yep.
is the book,
Roller.
I believe. I'm rough. Yeah. So anyway, yeah, man, and I would say the other things that define me are I love Jesus. That's a
Mhm.
big part of who I am and like the values that I've I try to live my life by, and the way I've found that is the most fulfilling way to live of all the ones that I've tried. And the and then the other things are I've got a family of 4 kids, and I'm married to an incredible lady named Jessie Cantrell. My last name is Cantrell. I don't know if we probably did the intro. You did the intro already, but yeah, Josh Cantrell, and we've got we live in Knoxville, Tennessee. We've got a great community of people around us, a lot of family around us, and yeah, I'd say I'm a 35 or 36. I started to lose count in early 30s when you stop being excited as much about it. I think I'm 36 this year,
I think
and
that's great.
I think I'm 36. I could do the math, but I'm terrible at math too, which is why I do writing for a living.
Yep.
But and yeah, man, that's the intro.
You said something earlier that I thought was really great. You mentioned that this is a journey that you've been on for the past 5 to 10 years. And I think what's really interesting here is to discuss what is that transformational moment for you. So, for instance, in my story, I used to make video games. And one of the things that is just true in that world is that, and with any creative field, really, like anything that you're super passionate about, hours become malleable, right? So, office hours, start time, end times. And one of the big moments for me was I recall very directly when my daughter was very young that I would drive home and wake her up to put her to bed so I could spend some time with her because I was out of the house
Mm,
before she woke up, and then I was home after she went to bed. And these were relatively normal hours. Just happened that with
yeah.
the commute and the hours that I was working, they just turned out that way. And it took a couple of years for it to sink in, but probably about 3 years after that happened, I just decided I was like, this isn't what I want anymore. I was
Yeah.
me taking a look at my father. So my parents were divorced, and so my biological father, I would see he just wasn't there. And then after high school, he we just stopped having communication. So it was like
Mm,
a good 15 years or so. But that moment, that realization that, oh, my father wasn't there. I don't want to be that person. And then
mm,
realizing, oh, I'm doing that to my daughter. And that caused this
yeah.
huge upheaval in my life. And I left the industry and pursued something else. So that was that moment for me where that thought
Mm,
pattern changed. And I realized, oh, I'm going to create something different. I'm really interested
yeah.
in what is yours. What was that moment for
Yeah.
you? What was your thought process?
Yeah. Totally. So I do actually have a single moment. I think that brought that for me. It was the first day back at work in 2017. I took
Mhm.
Christmas off, came back into the office, and they said, "You don't have a job here anymore." And it was the first time I'd ever been fired from a job. I was always like a I was always a super hard worker, like really top of close to the top of the class, not like the very top, but
Sure.
within a good reach of the top. I'd say like a solid B plus student. And 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 so yeah, that was the first time in my life I was ever like, wait, what? Whoa, I gotta start over. What's going on? And so I was just evaluating what do I want to do next? And I didn't want to go work I was working in-house as a marketing director for a technology company at the time,
Mm.
and had recently come to that new company from another like very successful marketing director role. Came into this new company, it didn't work out, and then left just thinking, what do we do next? And for me, I started telling friends about like where I was at. I was like, I don't want to go work for another agency. That lifestyle doesn't appeal to me right now, because I knew how hard my other friends were working, how little they got to see their families, like how stressful and high stress that environment was. And then I didn't really want to just go look for more of the same thing of what I had been doing before. And so I started telling folks that, and they're like, man, you should come and just let us pay you to do some marketing. And so I was like, okay, cool. And so I started making a few bucks here and there, and started trying to find ways to make money to support my family besides the $275 in unemployment and I was taking each week. And so one of the fun things that happened at the beginning of that journey of trying to go from jobless to sustainable business owner was I just started trying to find ways to make money. One of them, I would DJ a bunch of weddings. I did a ton of weddings in college, and I was like, all right, maybe I'll go find some more. And so I'd go make $300 a night working as a DJ or something.
The wedding DJ. Love it.
I like to tell people I was Jay Wiki Flavor.
There you go.
That was my name. But
Let's go into the thumbnail.
Nobody actually called me that. We tried to be a little classier than that. I wasn't on the ground doing the worm trying to get the party going, but it was more like a master of ceremonies type thing. So it was fun for a while, but again, weddings are super high stress. Didn't want to do that forever. Another thing I tried was I bought the contents of 11 storage units, sight unseen, in like the boonies, like way out in the country, which I didn't have a truck. I didn't have like anything. I just went up there, paid $400 and had 11 storage units. And they were like, you got to get this out in 72 hours. And I was like, oh crap. And I opened up all these doors and I'm like, shit, crap. This is awful. There's so much garbage in these things.
Yep.
So anyway, I was on the hook to clear them all out. And so one of the things that happened during that process was, it was like, all right, I'm in this situation. I have to find a way to solve it. And so that was like, and then we solved it. Like I hired a friend of mine. We found out where the scrap metal yard was, rented a U-Haul and a storage unit and like all these things. I didn't have a plan, but it was like, all right, now I'm in the situation. How can we get out? And that was the start. And we got it all out. We made a bunch of money. Not like crazy. Didn't find a golden Harley in there or anything, but it was still a good experience. And that combined with starting to get new clients helped me realize like, oh, I can take control of this situation. And I don't just have to take what's being thrown at me. I can go create something new. And man, yeah, that was the start of like, all right, you're in control. Don't just sit there and wait for a paycheck. Not that that's bad, but just that I wasn't growing in that environment. And so now that I'm on my own to go hunt and kill everything we eat, so to speak, something clicked in my brain. And I started looking at the world differently and thinking about, there is literally endless opportunity for me and my family. And I just got to wake up and go look for what I want and go get it. And it's been a super cool experience, man. That's a long-winded way of saying that's where it all started.
I think that's such a great story. And I think it's something that we all need to hear so much, is that because it's something that you and I definitely have in common there. And I'm sure that fathers out there have the same thing. It's that there's these pivot points in our life where we can choose the path that we want to walk. And Toni Morrison has some quotes about this, right? Where it's just, hey, we get to choose what path we take in life, and we get to choose the impact. And I think that one of the great things about being alive, certainly today, is that we're living in this world where people are choosing to take control of their life. And it's absolutely wonderful. Something that's been really curious to me, like, how old was your family like at this time? Yeah. I'd be really interested.
Yep. Yeah. So it's 2017. I had a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. And within about 3 months of getting fired, we got pregnant. So
Got it.
I'm still taking unemployment and Sunday nights applying for jobs to make sure those checks keep coming in, and trying to scrap dollars together. And there's a lot of prayer and stuff involved in that season, but Yeah. So we had another kid that same year.
One of the things that's common from my story with the video game industry is I went to a lot of startups. So a lot of businesses closed.
Mm.
So there's a lot of time in between a paycheck and then, a check from the government.
Mm.
And I think a lot about how I want to teach my daughters this lesson
Mm.
of the difference between the resume, so to speak, because we're both in this different world, right? There's a difference between here's the list of everything that you've done and the best way that you know how to present it, right? That's your resume versus your personal brand, which is this is who you are, what you care about, and how you present yourself to the world, right?
Yeah.
And I think that one thing that naturally occurs when you go from that passive participant in the economy, you're adding value. So this is not a judgment on the employee world because it's a fantastic place to be. You're always adding value, but the difference is when as you said it, I love it. When you're the hunter, you're evaluating things differently. You're presenting yourself differently and you're showing and you're being of service, right? That in and of itself is a super
Mm.
Christian thing. But what do you think about how you're going to present this to your family, maybe to your kids as a
Mm.
lesson? And what else do you
Mm.
do? What other kind of values and life lessons are you imparting to them?
Yeah. Wow. Such a good question. So our last name is Cantrell. It
Right?
is Cantrell. So like we have this phrase that comes up in our family a lot where it's like, I don't know why this works, but it's worked for my 6 and 7 year old where they're like, I can't do that, Dad. And I'll be like, wait, hold on, pause, time out. We're Cantrells, y'all, not
Mm-hmm.
Cantrells. So
Nice.
we're Cantrells. It's built into our name. We can do these things. And not to just throw out some silly, unrealistic expectation for what you can do. Yeah, you're going to be my under my 6 year old daughter wants to grow up and be an MMA wrestler, whatever. She totally could. But that's an example of something she could do if she wanted to do it. But so one of the things I try to do is think through what how can I impart to them a mindset that like I am not a victim. I can do something. What can I do? Last week I was like, "Hey guys, mom's out for the day and we're going to make dinner and I want you guys to make dinner." And they were like, "Oh my gosh, what?" And then they were just so scared about the idea of that. I think they thought they were going to have to do a 9 hour pork butt on the smoker like I like to do, but I was like, "No, hold up. Can we put carrots on a plate?" And they're like, "Yeah, we could do that." "Can we cut up some turkey and put it on the plate?" "Yeah, we could do that." So anyway, they ended up planning the meal, making dinner, eating it, and then came home and showed mom, and they were so proud. And so, like one of the little triggers for us is like, wait, I feel some hesitation about I can't do something, but you're totally capable of doing it, and just reminding them that you can do it. It's built into our name. So for us, it's like a little identity game. Like your identity is a doer, and you are capable. And so, as opposed to like, I can't do something. So that's one thing. The other ways that, and I would say a lot of that came out of getting fired and learning I'm not a victim. I can transform my life and create something new. Other ways to your second question, just like what are some other ways that you try to instill values? I think like the things that you do with your quantity time are by nature the values you're instilling. And are by default the values you're instilling. So it's kind of there's intentional times of instilling values, and then there's just like values that just get absorbed because of how you live your life. And so I think it's sometimes helpful to think about those separate things. Not that I've done like a ton of intentional thinking about this, but as we're talking about it, I'm like, okay, yeah. So one of the things, like for my 8 year old, or my 7 year old, he's about to be 8 this June. And so I'm trying to think about like, how can I help his mindset shift from little boy into big boy? He's at that stage now where he's going from everybody does everything for me and I'm just a cute little kid with no responsibilities to now I get to be like a contributing member of this family. And what does that actually look like for him? And so I want to get him excited about that. And so one of the things we're going to do is have a rite of passage weekend for his 8th birthday. I've heard people doing this. I was like, that sounds cool. My kid's 4. I can't really do that now. But like now that he's 8, he's able to think about and process some of these bigger concepts. And so like leadership and servanthood and humility and hard work and joy and trusting in Jesus and all that stuff. So those are some things that I want to spend some intentional time with him away. We're going to go camping. I got a buddy who's going to take us out on his drift boat and do some fishing and just have a super fun dad experience, but then also some intentional planning about what does the next 5 years of your life look like, buddy? And what are some goals we set for you? And how can I support you becoming the big boy you want to be? And then on the flip side is like the just how you live your life in front of your kids. And so I would say they're gonna get values, but what are those values? And I'm realizing that like one of the values I'm unintentionally instilling in my kids is that my phone is so interesting and so much cooler than you sometimes. You know what I mean? Just by having it out, talking, like totally distracted. Dad, dad, dad.
Yeah.
Like, man, get the freaking phone out of here. So I'd say that not all the values I'm instilling are great all the time, but I want to be intentional about just paying attention to the things that they're just absorbing. So
have any of those realizations, because the phone time is something that we're all dealing with, like as a society, right?
yeah,
Johann Hari's book, Stolen Focus, is a great read on it, and just a discussion. And in addition to that, my experience from video games, it's very easy to hijack your attention. Like we can do it. I did it professionally. We know how to.
Yeah. There's an actual science to making you.
There is
giving you ADHD.
Yep. What other big lessons? I mean, that attention and focus is something. When I think specifically about what is a uniquely masculine trait, that is something that sort of society at large relies on men for. It's that focus, right? That is, and it's not something that isn't shared, but definitely hyper focused, and that intentionality of where you're paying attention is something that is really required, I think, of us. And that comes down to, if you're chasing a mammoth for 5 days, you need to be able to pay attention to the mammoth and survive while you're hunting it and then dragging it back. I'm sure that there's some evolutionary stuff there. What are other big lessons? This is a much more of an introspective discussion, right? What are the other big things that are small that are having a big impact that you're noticing in you and your family?
Man, that's a great question. I'd say to some degree, it is the idea of ownership over solutions. Like, we're not living our life waiting for someone to come rescue us. I want to, it could be anything. I can't find the charger for my iPad. Great. It's not my problem. That should be your problem. You are very capable of solving this problem on your own. And sometimes the solution is literally just asking for help. A lot of times they'll just be like, I can't find it. I'll be like, can't help you unless you ask. You got to ask for something. I'm totally willing to help you. And so sometimes even just taking ownership is acknowledging the fact that you don't know something and just asking specifically for it instead of just complaining. And that's one thing I find myself in conversation with my kids a lot, trying to train them out of helplessness and into agency, like of taking ownership over the solution to this. And then another thing would be service. How can I not just take ownership over my own situation, but ownership over everybody in this family? Like, this family is a team, and I want my kids to think of each other as a team and not as rivals. And I want them to honor each other and celebrate their wins and not think of that person's success is at my success's expense. And so it's not a competition, although competition is good at times. I'd say service is another thing where another thing, I don't know if I do it the best way. Sometimes it comes out like a guilt trip, I'm sure, but I try to point to the fact that my kids have been taken care of all day by their mom. And like, when they're asking for yet another thing at the end of the day, I'm like, have you guys thought about how much mom's done today? Like, pointing them back to the service that mom has been giving to them in homeschooling them and in cooking for them and supporting them and driving them places. And so that's another one too, is just like trying to raise their awareness about the fact that like everything I'm getting from other people is a gift. And I could be a part of giving that to others too. And yeah, so those are a few things that come to mind really quickly. And then the last one I think is the last big one that is a big part of our life is trying to center our kids' lives on the Word of God, on the Bible, and knowing that like by internalizing scriptures and listening to how what God is communicating through these men that wrote the Bible and the women that contributed to the stories and all that stuff. There's some real tested, proven wisdom for not only just how to live life, but how to know God and how to feel and how to be a full human and live a full life. And so we try to spend a lot of time. They're not 6 years old reading through the Bible every year or anything, but we try to spend some time just like learning Psalm 23 and putting hand motions with it so that they can kind of remember it more easily. And yeah, so that's a big one too. Yep.
That's awesome. I love it. We had, we had a little bit of self-learning in the phone and the intention, which is great. Again, Johan Hari, Still in Focus, great book on that. Ownership over solutions. I loved it. And we had a little bit of a agency over humility there. Service, gratitude was really discussed. And I love the discussion about kids' lives and the Word of God and stuff like that as well. I was looking at in my mastermind this morning. It's a faith-based one. And there were some really good discussions about things like, if God is for me, who can be against me? We were talking a lot about like managing challenging relationships and how we're perfect in God sees us perfect in Christ. And so if God sees us that way, then the truth will be revealed in anything that's challenging or anything like that. That's wonderful.
That's good, man.
I love that you mentioned, because I think this is something that as fathers, we all need to learn, right? Is that you shine the light on your wife and the mother of your children. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing? Let's stay with this theme of intentionality versus quantity. Can you talk a little bit about how you're shining that light on her and showing, because a part of that is what we're instilling and what you're instilling in your kids is this is what a relationship looks like. And that's an additional responsibility that we don't talk about as fathers, is that the way you show up with the mother of your children, with your wife or SO or however that relationship works, that's the model. That's the first model of love. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, dude, that's so good, man. I'm not going to pretend like I'm the best at this or anything, but there are some things that I've found to be really helpful. And, and one is I just think that it's so easy for couples to drift apart in service of the children. Like we're spending the 18 years that we've got this kid in our house to invest in them. And then they forget that like the core unit that is holding the core structure of the family is the husband and the wife. And they are the kids, they don't, I've heard people say this, and I only have a 7-year-old, so I haven't lived this out, but I have seen it be when the marriage is negative, like it affects the children. When the marriage is focused only on the children, it actually, one, doesn't help the marriage as much. Like you don't have a source for rejuvenation and friendship and camaraderie and fellowship and romance and all the good stuff that comes from marriage. But then also like your kids end up growing with this mindset that I am a tiny king or a tiny queen. So what I found is that it's helpful to communicate to the kids their level in the hierarchy of the family.
I get it. I get what you're saying.
Yeah. And so like sometimes I'll just stop and be like, guys, who's dad's favorite person in the whole wide world? And they'll be like, Mom. I'm like, heck yeah, she is. I want you guys to know that. Who's dad's other favorite people in the whole wide world. Us, yes, exactly. And so just like making that fun, it's not like I'm trying to put them down, obviously, but I want them to know that like my number one priority is mom. And because mom, how we've got our family structure right now, and is that mom is the primary nurturer, educator, tender of the flock throughout the day while I'm not there. And so I want them to know that she has my full respect, full support, and that if I'm going to side with somebody, it's going to be mom. You know what I mean? And so the kind of authority that a dad can bring that a mom can't always bring sometimes, or maybe not to the same degree or the same flavor, I want them to know that she has like through me and with my support. And yeah, so I'd say that's a big way. There's probably some other things that might reflect that, but that's a big one for us.
I like that. I like the you've got our back, right? I can't think of when I think of the times that I've been very successful with my wife, it's been that way as well, where it's been, oh, I have your back. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever the decision is. Oh, we go do it.
Sure.
Or I've even had those conversations. I remember the first time my daughter found out that I wasn't her first. When I could see that it broke her heart a little bit, but it wasn't, it was interesting that navigating that conversation, she was a child at the time. It was, hey, like, it doesn't mean I love you less. It's
Mm-hmm.
my love for my wife is very different than my love for you.
Totally. Yep.
And also she was here first. Like a little bit
Yeah,
less.
she's here first.
She's here first, and she's gonna be here last.
For sure.
And that's that commitment. And I know it actually was just coming up for me there was you modeled that very well, whether consciously or unconsciously, is that commitment where you're just like, no, like I'm committed. And you're showing your children that romantic love, a big piece of that is long-term commitment. I am committed to my wife.
Yep.
I'm committed to the decisions that she's making. I'm going to support her in what's going on. Oh, and by the way, are we so grateful about how wonderful she is?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, man. Yeah. The commitment part is huge. And it is, I think as men, it's easy to take for granted that relationship and then let your eyes wander. You're scrolling on Instagram, you find yourself in some dark hole on the internet, or just like your eyes are wandering. And like over time, you start to think, man, why isn't my relationship with my life like where it needs to be right now? And it's like, man, you say you're committed, but your heart and your eyes and your minds are like 1,000 different places. I think it's a constant struggle. It's like one of those honest, real conversations that guys need to have with each other is like, how are you kind of like controlling your eyes? Are you controlling like what you think about and who you think about? And man, that is the biggest, I would say that expression of your commitment is such a huge contributor to like the quality of your marriage, and especially like how she perceives your love for her. So yeah, I would just say that's a huge deal.
I think that lust idea, that's something that I don't know if you know much about this piece, but like the dating study and the what's been happening sort of like for young people and stuff like that. It's a really it's a very challenging environment for people to find that commitment. We've created a society where you can unsubscribe. You can unsubscribe from a conversation you don't want to be a part of, right? You don't, something's not going your way on Facebook or Instagram, anywhere. If something's not going your way, you can just, all right, I'm done. I'm out. Unsubscribe. And I think part of that commitment piece is that you hang out, right? That's part of the vow, right? Better for worse, rich or poor, all that kind of stuff, sicker in health. In that traditional vow, right? You're hanging out and stuff. And I think what's really interesting is the lack of conversation around that. When we first met, you and I actually did have a conversation about this. We were like, oh, when I was just coming over and just hanging out, and it happened to be top of mind for me, and I was just thinking about it, and I was like, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this? And you were just super open about your take on it. And we're both coming at it from a perspective of Christian men and just saying, hey, this is a thing. And, here's a situation, here's this situation, emotionally, intellectually, that kind of stuff. But coming at it from a perspective of that vulnerable sharing, right? We're coming together to share each other's experience and support each other. And that, and now we're having this conversation, which is fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One thing that we were talking about beforehand that I thought was really great is that combination of the physicality. And if you're open, I'd love to have that talk about how the physical, the personality of the family, and some things that are going on for you in this next stage of your journey as a father and as your family.
Yeah. Just for some context, why don't you share what you were talking about in terms of introverted, extrovert,
right,
and blood flow and how people work and stuff like that, and I'll jump into the next part.
I read a long time ago when we were talking, I was reading and learning about introversion and extroversion. And part of it was around thinking fast and slow. I know that there are some theories in there that have been corrected, but what I learned at the time was that there may be a physiological component to extroversion and introversion, and it had to do with sort of blood flow and how the blood flowed through the brain and how the synapses were firing and all the neurons and how everything was going and moving through with thoughts and coming to conclusions, stuff like that, and how there may be a biological component. I'm certainly not a neuroscientist or anything like that, but there may be a biological component to the way that we show up in that way, like that the way that the body is built has an impact on the personality, and how there's usually a direct correlation between those pieces, and they can absolutely be overcome. And that's the thing, like nobody's fixed. That's something that I very firmly believe in. There's no fixed people. There's only fixed mindsets. And evident by the fact that you aren't born able to walk or eat, really. So you had to learn how to chew. You have to learn how to do all these different things. You have to learn how to walk. And so, okay, if you're basically the same components, then that extends throughout everything. But the body does have a big impact on the way the body is wired, the way that your body has grown. We look at people with addiction. We look at people with severe mental handicaps. We look at people that have had severe injuries, right? The things that happen to your body have a dramatic impact on you in the way that you're both positive and the way that you show up in the world. And yeah, so that's the core idea, is that there's a link.
Yeah.
There's a link.
Totally. Yeah. And I thought it was super interesting. Specifically, you were talking about how in introverted people, there is some evidence to show that the blood, the vessels that like connect certain parts of your brain that contribute to quick decision making and thinking on your feet and being at home in like group settings and stuff like that. There's some evidence to show that the blood actually takes a little longer to flow through those areas in certain introverted people's brains. And so the fact that they're not ready to spout out an idea at a group board meeting or something like that, but need a day to think about it, is not a deficiency in their thinking. It's a different way of thinking. So yeah, that kind of led to this idea of like, how does your body influence your personality, and what are some ways that might show up? I'm an Enneagram 9. And so I don't know if anybody's heard of that. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with Enneagram, right?
I'm familiar with Enneagram, but why don't you tell us a little bit about what a 9 means?
Yeah. So a 9 is basically like, there's like an advocate, a peacemaker. So my default is to go into a room and think like, all right, who needs to get taken care of here? Who needs to get maybe corrected or pushed away from this sensitive situation? And so I'm a middle child, and I would say I probably have the best relationship with my parents, specifically my mom, than my other two kids, because I was the one always thinking about who's okay, I got to give that person the benefit of the doubt. And so I was always probably the easier kid to parent. And so therefore I probably by nature have an easier relationship with my parents. Not to in any way disparage my brother and sister. I would just say that they ended up getting like the harsher end of the deal, just because I think of how they were wired a little bit. And so if I was a little bit more assertive, probably I probably would have had the same sort of struggles. But anyway, or the same sort of like parental conflicts. And so one of the things I'm thinking about is how the way you're wired to interact with people and how that makes you show up in the world. Like even that isn't fixed. And so the more I've been learning about the Enneagram, and there's a ton of these, Myers-Briggs, DISC, all the personality index, all that stuff. But I've been digging into Enneagram a little bit. And the way I've been thinking about that is it's actually given me a set of tools to understand how I am probably wired and how I need to operate in order to overcome the things that I tend to be weak in. So I would tend to be weak in saying, I need this for myself. You need to hear my voice because I have something worth saying. That's actually not my default place. And so as a business owner, that's one place that shows up. It's like, I don't like promoting myself. Guess what? That's a big deal. Like you got to build a personal brand and you got to build a corporate brand. And yeah, I feel like I'm rambling through that topic a little bit, but that's one of those ways that shows up for me. But another one that I'm realizing is in my kids, obviously. And so specifically my third child, Theo, who's 4 now, who's just diagnosed with autism last week. And so we're currently like in the middle of thinking through what that means for us and our family, looking to the future. Man, is this going to be really hard, or is he going to grow out of a lot of this stuff? How much is therapy going to cost? I think they say the average family with an autistic child spends $60,000 a year on their therapy and care. Man, that's a good chunk of money.
That's a chunk.
Yeah. And how do we process like bringing him into school environments or group environments where he just doesn't interact the same way as our other kids? And one of the things that's come that I've been realizing is that his condition, his disorder makes him view the world differently. So bright lights are probably 10 times brighter to him than other kids.
Sure.
The way things feel is a lot more intense. The way things taste in your mouth is a lot more intense, which is why he doesn't like to eat stuff as much. And he complains a lot more than the other kids at the dinner table.
Okay.
When we go to the zoo and there's a bunch of sounds, like it's overwhelming, and he ends up like coming into himself, and he'll end up breaking down really quickly, getting frustrated. And I used to, before this diagnosis and refused before, I was like, man, just get your act together. Come on, be like the other kids. Yeah. But now I'm realizing, oh, he's literally wired so that everything around him is happening at a more intense level. So it makes sense that he retreats into himself. And so one of the things that I found is, oh, okay, I can, instead of being frustrated that you're not like these other kids or you need a little more care, like what do you actually need physically in order to be the person you need to be emotionally and socially? And so one example would be like, we went to the mall last week and he was in the stroller and it was kind of overwhelming and he was not talking. I was like, buddy, do you want me to like pull the canopy over so like you can't see as much or hear as much? He was like, yeah. And so we did that and he had a great time. And so like, I think that, yeah, that conversation about what do you need physically to be who you want to be emotionally and spiritually. Like a lot of times we're just kind of go grind, go hard. You just work hard. That's the secret to everything. But man, no, you need some recharge time and taking time in order to be the person you want to be for your family. You've got to pay attention to who you are as a body.
Yes. Yeah.
And so anyway, I think it's a big deal too.
I think what I loved about that is this is something that I've been able to manifest for my first daughter, and definitely for my second daughter, is that idea of curiosity. From me, I never wanted to be like, oh, I hope that she does this or I hope she does that. I remember distinctly somebody asking me like, what are you looking forward to? And some fathers like, oh, I'm looking forward to taking my kids fishing and doing that kind of stuff. And I love that stuff. And I knew like in my head as a game developer and that tech being a part of my past, I'm like, I'm looking forward to seeing what she enjoys. I love pop culture. I love movies, TV. It's It's a big part of me. It's been a big part of me since I was in high school with summer camps. But the core thing that I was looking for, that I saw in you as well, was in your story, was that curiosity. I knew, and that's what I said. I said, I'm looking forward to seeing what choices she makes. I want to know who she is, right? And I don't want to, and I want to steer her and help her with her values and help her become rounded, but I don't want to direct. I
Yeah.
want to have the values, and then I want to figure out who she is. And I thought it was
Yeah.
super funny. People always used to remark in the family on some of her outfit choices. So she's got these really nice leather boots, this really nice leather jacket, but she'll wear like a pink tutu and nice frills. She's got that the club kids goth thing going on a little bit sometimes, but she's a super girly girl at the same time. And I was just like, yeah. And everybody was just doing stuff, commenting on it. And I was just like, she's figuring out her style. You know, she's figuring out who she wants to be and how she wants to show up in the world. And she has this creative edge that, you know, in drawing and storytelling. And one of the first pictures that she drew was she did a video game load screen because she had seen them. She was like, oh, I want to make a video game and have like unicorns and stars and people and houses and stuff like that. But it also had new game, load game, save game, settings. And I was like, oh, this is a game UI. Look at this. This is so cool. And I love the fact that when we take the things that you really care about, what are the values for you and your family, that ownership over solutions, right? A big piece that I identify with is that curiosity part, because you found something, right? There's something that exists now in your family. And you're like, oh, what's the solution to this? And I'm sure that part of that discussion is instilling that into your family, into your kids, with this new situation you guys are handling.
Yeah,
Love it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And one of the ways that shows up is just helping my kids empathize with their autistic brother, their bro on the spectrum,
Yep.
and helping them understand what that means about his world. And I was like, I was trying to explain what autism was, and I was like, you know how like you guys will all go off in the backyard and play, and you'll come back in, and Theo's got like a car, and he's just spinning in circles, like saying Chase is on the case, like over and over. I was like, that's his autism coming out. And then and my son, who's 7, was like, oh man, I see Theo's autism come out all the time. And so it's like, I'm like, I know, right? And so anyway, now he's able to see, oh, he has something that might need a little bit more care and attention. And so I think they're like focused in and bought into the idea of helping him and loving on him that way, giving him what he needs. But I love what you said about curiosity, dude. I think that's another value just personally that I don't know that I'm necessarily instilled it in the kids, but I hope they get that from us. Love like learning new things. My wife and I joke about it all the time. Like if I could just get paid to learn how to do stuff, not become an expert at it, but just like learn enough to be okay at it, like I'm good. And I just want that to be my full-time job. But maybe I'll start a YouTube channel just about like becoming average at something. Not getting like great at it.
Becoming average. I love it.
Becoming average.
Becoming average at something. We can work on the title anyway, a little
bit. Right. But anyway, I love what you said about your daughter, and like, I want to guide her. I want to like present opportunities, put the buffet of life in front of her and be like, which ones does she, what's the plate she wants to make for herself?
Yeah.
And so I think that's a super cool idea, man.
I also played hockey a lot. And so ice skate, I was super delighted when she said, oh, I want to learn how to ice skate. And so nice. we took her to lessons and we did that. And we went on the ice a couple times and just wasn't really jamming with her. But now she's doing roller skating and she loves it. She loves it.
Nice.
So it's just, hey.
How old is she?
10. She's 10.
10. Cool.
Yeah. And then the new one's on the way in a couple months here. So it's a big gap.
That's awesome.
But it's good.
That is a big gap.
I'm super excited. I'm very excited. Persephone is our new daughter. She's going to have an older daughter, Elise. This is the funny story. I don't mind sharing it here, but I was coming home from the event where we met. And so I get out the airport. I was up super early. I was up at 3 a.m. to catch like a 5 a.m. flight. And so, the state we get into when we don't have a lot of sleep, for me, I was barely awake. And so I get into the passenger seat because they pick me up from the airport and they're like, oh, open the present. It's on the passenger seat. And so like I do it. And this little onesie comes out and it says little sisters roll. And I was like, what? I'm trying to make sense of the words. I'm like, little sisters, they roll. I'm like, does this mean rock and roll? So I'm like in my head, like trying to figure out what this means. And then I just like, oh, you're having a little sister. so that's how I
Wow.
found out. And at least
Oh my
our eldest
gosh.
has a older sisters rock, and then it's little sisters roll. And so when they have that together,
Oh, I get it.
it's gonna be
That's
fun.
hilarious.
And so it
What a
was really,
fun. That's amazing, man.
yeah, really celebrating the girl dad and embracing that part of life now.
Mm.
So Josh, if folks want to get in touch with you, right? You do branding, you do copying, you support both the marketing and branding efforts. Where can they find out about you and how can they connect with you?
Thanks for asking. It's Josh at signalbrandworks.com is my email. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me. Going to LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/Josh Can, or you can go to just my website, signalbrandworks.com. No funky spelling or anything. It's just signalbrandandworks.com together. So
Nice.
that's it,
Awesome.
man. Yeah.
Thanks.
Love to
So
connect with
much.
anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. And we'll definitely send some folks over if we can. If you're interested, please check it out. Josh is absolutely amazing. I can't refer him enough. But thanks so much for telling us about, in particular, I really love the intention versus quantity discussion. I really love the not being a victim in life. That was such a great lesson. I think that can be, it can be passed on. I love it because you're Cantrells. I love it. The great emblem.
Right.
And thanks so much for the conversation.
Yeah, dude. Appreciate you, man. This is a lot of fun.
Great. Hey, Feel Good Fathers, hit that like button to let YouTube know that you liked this video. Comment below with your thoughts and reactions to this interview. I really want to hear what you have to say. Now, as a personal brand strategist, I hear all the time about coaches, trainers, speakers, and authors doing the right thing, but at the wrong time. We specialize in helping brand builders have more impact, more credibility and clarity, and developing an overall brand strategy. When you work with Brand Builders Group, we'll help you do the right thing at the right time. Request a free brand call below. There's a link in the description. And don't forget to subscribe. You'll get updates when the new episodes are launched, and it really helps out the community and the channel. We'll see you next time.